They Came From Below offers a completely different experience to the main game of We Happy Few, and it is a great improvement to the gameplay. The story itself is also a fascinating departure from the main story, and I want to share it with you. So here is the story of They Came From Below in 5 minutes or less. The DLC throws us right into the action, playing as Roger Bacon, one of Dr. Faraday's houseboys who we met in the main game. The year is 1962, 2 years prior to the events of the main game. Roger had been sent on errands by Dr. Faraday, retrieving a Bobby helmet from Peggy and picking up items from Vivian, the shopkeeper. Roger hopes to himself that collecting the helmet won't be awkward, but it very much is, as Peggy borrowed it so she would have an excuse to see him. Roger's conversation with Vivian is also a bit awkward, as she says she knows about him and James, but turns out she just thought they were Irish. As Roger returns home, he sees an explosion coming from the house. He runs inside and finds his boyfriend James Maxwell unconscious and sees Dr. Faraday disappearing into a portal. Roger and James search for clues, finding a note about a previously unknown basement. Finding a way into the basement, Roger and James finds that it actually leads down to a massive underground structure populated by robots. Roger also finds a ray gun, which he takes, much to James's dismay. Roger goes to start investigating, but James is attacked by one of the robots and he stops to save him, before heading into the power wing. Roger activates the security system and has to find a way to deactivate it. Roger locates the room that controls the power, but then the lights cut out, and he has to find the generator room and restore power there. After restoring the power, Roger looks for a way out, and comes across 2 battling groups of robots. The victorious group then pursues him as he flees the facility, finding his way out through an escape hatch, which appears to be part of the subway system we saw in the main game. As Roger opens the hatch, he sees the shopkeeper Vivian being killed by a robot. He finds that robots have started to invade, and he fights them off before running back to Dr. Faraday's house to check on James. James tells Roger to stay in the house as he goes to look for Faraday, but Roger refuses, saying that James is injured and Roger should be the one to go look for her. Roger believes that she'll be in the research wing of the facility and goes to look for her while James waits in the control room. Roger presses on and finds a lab where Dr. Faraday was experimenting using a curious device. This device is the device Ollie Starkey will give to Arthur 2 years later in the main game to pretend to be a bridge inspector. The device interacts with control panels to move things around. Roger searches for Faraday and comes across a monstrous experiment where Faraday appears to have been combining robots. As Roger peers into the room with his creation, another robot enters and pulls off one of the robot heads, holding it and repeating the word sorrow. Roger is horrified to find that the robots are sentient feeling beings, as he has already killed a great many of them. Roger eventually finds Faraday, confronting her about the robots, but she brushes him off and says she is going to use the robots for agriculture, and that to ensure compliance will use a positronic converter to hijack their feedback loop. This will mean they will do what she wants without needing to be programmed. Roger is upset and resolves to find the converter and stop Faraday. He finds a deconstructed robot that he can reactivate, and when talking to it, it explains that Dr. Faraday's plan is to make the robots love her, so that they will do what she wishes without thought. Roger then returns to James and they argue, with James feeling that the robots are just tools to be used, whereas Roger believes that they are thinking, feeling beings. Roger goes on to pursue Faraday and the converter, heading into the conversion wing. He finds Faraday overseeing the conversion process. Faraday directs Roger to check on the converter, but when he refuses to help her, she calls in robots to kill him. Roger fights the robots and destroys the converter, triggering Faraday to declare that she will have to burn all the robots to stop them from killing everyone in Wellington Wells. Roger returns to James and they argue again. James asks Roger if he is going to side with the humans or the robots, but when Roger says he is siding with both, James says he has lost his mind, and that he will have to stop Roger from making a terrible mistake. James attacks Roger and Roger has to knock him out. Roger goes after Faraday to stop her from burning all the robots and is forced to fight a headmistress controlled by Faraday. During the fight, James comes to Roger's aid, throwing explosives at the headmistress, declaring that he would rather die with Roger than without him. After Roger finishes off the headmistress, the robots come from the portal to take Faraday back to their realm for justice, and they say that they will close the portals for good. Roger protests that humans and robots have much to learn from each other. The robot says Roger can come through the portal to try and convince the robots there to keep the portals between the worlds open. James tells Roger that he should go through the portal. Roger then has a choice to make. He can either convince James to go through the portal with him, or he can leave him behind. This ends the story of They Came From Below. How much of the story is real, as in actually happened in the universe of We Happy Few, is unknown, as all the protagonists of We Happy Few are unreliable narrators, and we are seeing these events from Roger's perspective. There is no mention of any of it in the main story, which happens 2 years later. The only evidence that it did happen is the curious device later given to Arthur. Whereas Dr. Faraday really seems no worse for wear, though of course we know that the people of Wellington Wells are particularly good at forgetting when bad things happen to them. So I'll leave it up to you. Do you think that the events of They Came From Below really happened, or is Roger a particularly unreliable narrator? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on my coverage of the 2 other DLCs for We Happy Few, Lightbearer and We All Fall Down.